We are the Childhood Collective, and we have helped thousands of overwhelmed parents find joy and confidence in raising their child with ADHD. I'm Katie, a speech language pathologist.
And I'm Lori.
And I'm Mallory, and we're both child psychologists. We combine the science of ADHD with the compassion of moms and bring you practical tools you can start using today.
So hit subscribe and let's help your family shine with ADHD. I'm here with Katie, and today we're talking about something we know many of your children with ADHD are facing: anxiety.
Yes, it is such an important topic, and I know it's one that we've both personally faced with our own children at various times.
Yes, and it's very common in kids with ADHD. In fact, anxiety is the second most common disorder that's diagnosed in kids with ADHD. And according to the CDC, around 33% of kids with ADHD also have anxiety. And the more concerning fact is that only 60% of children who have an anxiety disorder ever go on to receive treatment. So that means there are a lot of kids that are out there really suffering from anxiety and not getting the tools that they need to cope with their worries.
Oh, it's so hard. Those statistics just
So hard.
tug on my heart.
I know.
So, if you're listening and you have a child that struggles with anxiety or frequent worrying, just know first and foremost, you are not alone. And if you think your child might have anxiety, but you aren't really sure, then that's a pretty common challenge for our kids with ADHD. And sometimes it's hard to even tell the two apart. So, today, I'm going to interview Lori. She is a child psychologist, for any of you who didn't know, and she specializes in anxiety. And so we want to talk with her about 5 things that all ADHD parents really need to know as we support our kids with anxiety. So let's jump right in. Lori, first and foremost, what are some signs that a child is truly anxious?
Yeah, so I think this is a really important first step for parents, because anxiety is not something that our kids are always going to say to us, especially our kids with ADHD. A lot of them just aren't even very good at understanding their feelings or talking about their emotions. So sometimes we don't hear our kids saying, I'm worried or I'm scared, especially when they're younger and they have a hard time saying the emotions that they're feeling.
It would be so much easier if they could just
so
say,
much easier.
Mom, I'm feeling a little bit anxious.
Yeah. But to be honest, do we do that all the time?
Okay, I do.
Lot. Okay. But I don't. I mean, I know there are times when I'm angry at my husband. And I don't say I'm angry, but I'm just short with him and I'm barking orders and things like that. But I don't say, sorry, I'm just feeling really angry right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't say the emotion that I'm feeling, but you will see it through my behaviors. And that's true of our kids. So, many kids with ADHD, one of the things that we'll see is them asking lots of questions when they're going into maybe new or unfamiliar situations. So question asking around what's going to happen or who's going to be there. And again, the core kind of issue with anxiety is that I don't like uncertainty. Uncertainty makes me feel scared. And I try and gain certainty by asking lots of questions around a thing that maybe I'm feeling anxious about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see lots of questions. Now, kids with ADHD also sometimes ask lots of questions about different things, sometimes because they are really impatient and excited for an activity or whatever. So sometimes it can be a little bit hard to parse that apart. So I think that's one thing to look at, maybe needing to do a certain behavior over and over again and not really being able to stop it. So a lot of kids will engage in checking. They might be checking on their dog or checking on their parents to make sure they're still in their room, or checking on a sibling. They might be checking the locks on doors or turning the lights off or looking out the window. So behaviors that you kind of see them doing over and over again. And maybe if you talk to them, why are you doing that? They articulate a fear.
Mhm.
something bad's going to happen. Somebody's going to break into the house. My dog's going to die. So those are things that you might see. Maybe just clinging to parents in new settings. So if your child goes to school and they just won't detach from you and they're just clinging to your leg, or expressing a lot of what if something bad happens. So
Mhm.
anxiety is really anticipating like something bad happening in the future. And it's not necessarily that that thing is going to happen, but we expect it to happen. So maybe a lot of questions about or expressing a lot of what if kind of scenarios that are all maybe negative in nature.
I remember talking to a girlfriend one time, and she was saying that her son was asking, Mom, what if we, the whole time she was driving, he was asking, Mom, what if we get in a car accident? Mom, what if we run out of
Hmm.
gas? Mom, what if we have a flat
Yep.
tire? And at the time, I'm not a child psychologist, and we were sort of laughing about it, thinking, like, oh, that's so cute. He's so worried about
Yes.
you. And then, we were actually talking with a friend of ours who is a child therapist, and she said, oh, wow, it sounds like he has a lot of anxiety. And it was such a reframe for us because I
Yes.
think a lot of times we don't, again, if you don't have a specialized training, you might not see it through that lens of, oh, wow, this is anxiety. It's like almost adorable. Oh, this little guy worrying
Yes.
if we're going to run out of gas. And that is
Yeah.
cute up to a certain point, but it can become debilitating and really have an impact. And so it's sometimes interesting, like hearing your perspective on that, because I'm like, oh, yeah, I can kind of go through that list. And my kids do some of those things too. It's
Yep.
all about the degree, right? And how much.
Yes. Yeah, and it's again normal for many kids to do those things. It's really, is it happening all the time?
Mhm.
Is it happening around certain activities? Um, a lot of kids will have frequent headaches or stomach aches. So a lot of times I have kids coming to see me in my office when they've been through the medical route and they've been through all
Mhm.
this testing and the doctors are saying, look, there's nothing medically wrong. We really think that this is probably, some symptoms of anxiety, and we don't really realize that our kids and our bodies and our minds are very much linked together. So when we feel or we're having worries or emotions, we're going to feel it in our bodies too. So we'll
Absolutely.
see complaints about physical types of things going on with kids. The other thing that many families get confused about is anger. So many kids, especially our kids with ADHD, will become extremely angry, aggressive, be behaviorally acting out when they're feeling anxious. And so, again, like our bodies go into fight or flight when we're feeling scared and they're preparing for a dangerous situation. So I'm either fighting this dangerous thing or I'm
Mhm.
fleeing the situation. And we don't really think about the fight aspect of fight or flight.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Would you say it's more with boys? Because I have a boy and a girl,
Mhm.
and I see that
Yes.
anxiety looking really different between the two of them. What's your thoughts on that? Like, boys might be more physical and more in that fight stage?
It just depends. Like I have a kiddo I saw recently too that were both girls that were, having separation fears, not wanting to go to school. There was school refusal
Mhm.
and really scared that something bad was going to happen to a parent. But again, they weren't verbalizing that.
Right.
And they were like destroying the front office at school and becoming aggressive. And
Yeah.
some of these kids are like not, they're just, their nature has not been aggressive, but
Mhm.
when they have these big feelings in their bodies, they don't know what to do with those, they don't know how to cope with that, and then it comes out in this way, and a lot of times again, and then it's embarrassing afterwards. And um, so I think it can happen in boys and girls, but yes, we see a lot of boys with ADHD where you're going to see those aggressive behaviors come out. And one thing to think about is that this a situation that they are having anxiety in.
Ugh.
What the main way that we all cope with anxiety, the sort of unhealthy way, is through avoidance. And so
Mhm.
you're going to see your kids trying to avoid situations that they're scared of because their body's saying, I can't cope right now we need to get out of this place immediately. So if your kids are avoiding certain situations, that can also be a sign that they're feeling anxious.
So many things to think about, but I think the way
I
you
know.
describe that is really powerful, because I know for myself, when I've had bouts of anxiety, that
Yep.
voice that tells you like you cannot cope is very loud.
Yes.
And I'm a
Very loud.
pretty rational person most of the time, but that voice is louder a lot of times than my rational thoughts, and it's really so challenging. And thinking about our kids going through that, it's just really, it's powerful.
So challenging. Yep.
So tell us a little bit more about how anxiety starts and what it looks like as it grows over time.
So, like I was saying before, when we're faced with a perceived threat. So again, like anxiety is we're anticipating something very bad happening. And for our kids, a lot of times it's not something rational. So it might be, I'm anticipating that I'm going to enter school and then my mom's going to die, or I'm entering school and my mom's literally going to leave me and take off and never come back. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And to a parent, that's not a rational fear, right? But in their mind, it feels very, very real. And when our brains and bodies don't differentiate between an actual threat in our environment versus one that we've created in our own minds, right? It responds in
Absolutely.
the same way. So when our kids have that anxiety about a scenario that they think is going to happen, it's like I'm in the woods and a bear has approached me and
Yes.
all of my body's panic alarms go off and I go into fight, flight, or freeze. And our body responds in that same way as if there was a bear in the environment. I'm either fighting this bear, I'm paralyzed with fear and I can't move, or I'm fleeing the situation. And most of us, again, flee the situation
Uh-huh.
when there's danger. So, like I said, there's going to be avoidance. So again, I remember working with a little boy who, again, he thought anytime I'm not with my mom, she's going to leave and she's never going to come back. And so I never leave her side. I cling to her. She can't go to the bathroom without me. She can't go into another room without me. I can't
Ugh.
leave her at school. And that fear can grow over time through avoidance. And that's what we try and really teach parents when kids are getting anxious. Avoidance of the thing that they're fearing is what causes it to grow bigger and bigger in their minds and in their bodies and in their reactions. And kids can avoid in different ways.
Hmm.
So they might engage in if they have OCD, they might engage in a repetitive behavior in their mind by saying a certain thing to themselves so nothing bad happens. Or they might stay next to their mom and never leave their side. They might
Mm-hmm.
refuse to go to school and avoid being away from them so they can make sure that their parent never leaves them.
And how stressful for parents, because I'm thinking
So
of, as a
stressful.
parent,
I
my kid
know.
is saying, "Don't leave me. I want to be next to you. I'm scared something bad is going to happen to you." And what am I going to do? I'm immediately going to be like, "Come sit by me. Like, we're together. It's okay." And I'm
Yes.
trying to help relieve that anxiety. But
Yes.
that, to your point, that's just avoiding the fear of being separated. And it's going to actually totally inadvertently make it worse and harder for my child to overcome this. That's so counterintuitive for parents.
When we as parents are dealing with anxiety, it is completely counterintuitive to everything we think we should do as parents. Like we think we should reassure them and tell them that nothing bad's going to happen, convince them of those things not happening, stay with them. But when we don't leave their side, when we don't make them do those things or go to school or do those situations, what we're really communicating to our kids is, yes, this is an actual fear and you don't have to do these things. I'm right here with you, right?
Oh gosh. And
Um,
no parent is trying to
no parent is
communicate
trying
that.
to, and it's not like you're saying that, right? But your kid is saying, oh, my mom also thinks that this is a real fear and she's staying with me, right? So again, it is, I think to your point, Katie, it is very counterintuitive to everything we feel like we should be doing as a parent. Over the past year, my oldest has really struggled with anxiety, especially at night. As soon as it was time for sleep, she'd be crying for me to stay and worrying about all the things. I was talking to another therapist about our bedtime battles, and she said the Zenimal, a screen free meditation device, had been a game changer for her daughter with ADHD and anxiety. I immediately purchased the Zenimal and can confidently say it was the best tool to help my daughter get better sleep. She was able to fall asleep an hour earlier using it.
Yes, it's actually really helped my kids to be able to calm their busy bodies at night.
What we love about the Zenimal is that it combines two of our favorite bedtime recommendations, using a relaxation strategy and removing screens from the bedroom.
The Zenimal is an adorable screen-free turtle with 9 guided meditations your kids can choose from. And our absolute favorite part of the Zenimal is that every meditation ends with the most important message: you're a good kid.
To grab your own Zenimal and get your child and yourself some better sleep, head to zenimals.com and use our code TCC for a discount. You can also find the link in the show notes.
So we know what not to do. Let's talk about the third thing that parents need to know, because this is going to be everyone's next question. So, what should we do when our kids are worrying or experiencing anxiety?
Yes. So I think one of the first things that you can do as a parent is we talk about maybe not letting our kids avoid those situations, but easier said than done, right? But
Definitely.
but I think again, they're having fears that maybe aren't rational. And sometimes your kids aren't vocalizing what that fear is. Sometimes they don't really know what that fear is. They just know something bad is happening. I know with my kids, sometimes they get scared, but they can't really say what it is that they're scared of.
Mhm.
Really starting with validating and normalizing those worries for them. So saying to your child, it's okay. I get worried too sometimes, and sharing with your child, times when you've been scared, that it's a very normal thing, because I think a lot of us feel alone in our emotions and
Mhm.
alone in feeling those big feelings, and letting our kids know it's okay to have those big feelings. It's okay to be scared, because a lot of times we're trying to be like, oh, well, there's no robber that's going to come in the house. Like, you're totally fine, right?
Yep. Like, I'm going to talk you out of
I'm
this.
going to talk you out of it. I think
Mhm.
our kids really a lot of times just want to feel seen and feel heard, and they want to know that you understand what is going on inside their body. And even though they might even know that their fear is not rational, but it doesn't change the fact that their body is responding with a very, very real reaction of being scared, and letting them know, I get that this is really hard for you. I can see that you're really anxious. I know you're having big feelings right now, and I'm right here with you. And just validating them and letting them know that you hear them and see them is so important, and such an important first step.
I love it. And I know that this is just an example of a script, right? That might not be the exact words for
No,
your
not
kid. But I
exactly.
think that the carryover there is the tone that you're using. And I think that tone that you're using is, in my mind, it's supportive, right? There's an empathy piece to
Yes.
it, but you're not getting sucked into it. You're not like, I know this is so terrible. And I think that it's very matter of fact, but in a loving and gentle way. And so when parents are listening and trying to figure out, okay, what words make most sense for my kid who's only 6 or who's 11 or whatever it is, really keeping that first and foremost in our mind of like really trying to have that firm but gentle way. You're not sucked into the
Mhm.
vortex.
Exactly, and it's
Yeah.
hard to not get sucked into that vortex sometimes.
Yes. Especially if you yourself have anxiety.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's really there's a whole nother layer to it when you can really
Yeah,
relate and like see that, and you actually might have your own fears going on. Okay.
yeah.
Thinking about our fourth tip, I personally love it when you tell parents to give their child's anxiety a name. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about that strategy.
Yes, so I think it's so important for to have a language around talking about the anxiety or stress that your kids are feeling. And we really, when we're treating anxiety with kids, we want them to give it a name, because it helps them to feel like, wait, I'm not this emotion. It's just a
Mhm.
feeling that I'm feeling, and I have some control over it. Because what happens when we have anxiety is it can feel like it's totally taking over our whole selves, and it is us. It defines us.
Mhm.
So it's a way of helping our kids gain some control over it, and also have a language around talking about their worries. So I always tell parents, like, try and think of something silly or funny. Like, I have a kiddo I'm working with right now that named her OCD worry Fluffy. So it's kind of a silly, a silly kind of name, and it sometimes makes it less scary when it's silly. I know my daughter called it the worry bully because we had read a book about bullies, and a lot of times we talk about worries in terms of bullies. Like, you can understand how a bully is, and we talk about how our bullies do mean things to us and tell us mean things, but we don't have to listen to them. We can stand
Mm.
up to them,
Oh,
right?
I love it. Yes.
So I think giving it a name helps you and your child to talk about it, and it helps your kids really start to gain control over it.
I love it. Okay, so for the fifth strategy, I know it's important to stop reassuring our children when they're anxious. And what should we be doing instead?
Yes, so that's that's the really important question. So if I'm not supposed to be reassuring them, so I think a lot of times, so let's use the example. I have a lot of kids that I've worked with over the years where the parents are like sleeping next to their kids at night while they fall
Mhm.
asleep. And part of that might be because I'm afraid a robber is going to break into the house. Let's say that that's kind of their core fear. um, as a parent, you might be tempted to be like, well, no robber is going to break in the house. Maybe you even do a Google search and look up data on how many break-ins that there have been in your neighborhood, right? And again, like, you're trying to get all of this information to talk them out of it, right? And
Absolutely.
instead, what we want to communicate to our kids is that their worries aren't to be trusted. Again, it's like a
Mm.
bully. It's bossing you around. It's telling you things that aren't true. It's trying to scare you. It's a bully. And we have to talk back to that bully. It isn't to be trusted. So we can start by maybe using a different language and talking to our kids. So instead of saying, don't worry, or there's nothing to be afraid of, or we've hardly had any break ins in the neighborhood, right?
Just
Um,
a couple.
just a couple. What is your worry? What is Fluffy, or what is your worry bully trying to tell you right now? What is your worry bully saying to you right now?
Hmm.
Do you think that that's really true? Like, why do you think the worry bully is saying that to you? Like, trying to talk about it in terms of the worry bully's communicating this thing. And let's start to maybe talk about talking back to that worry bully. And we would always tell our kids to stand up to a bully, right? So
Absolutely.
giving our kids a language to maybe cope with that when they're feeling frustrated. And you'd be amazed at how well even young kids can articulate some of those things. Like, my worry bully, every time I start to talk back to it, it gets louder. And he says even scarier and scarier things to me.
Hmm.
And then it makes me do the thing that I'm trying not to do. I'm trying not to listen to it and not, be next to you all the time. But he says these really loud, scary things. And then we can have a conversation with our kids about how to cope with that. But we're teaching them skills to be independent in coping with that anxiety.
How empowering too for our kids, like to teach them to stand up and speak back. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
So we know that to some extent, a little bit of anxiety is typical. We see this across most kids, right?
Yes.
So I'm thinking about parents who are listening, and at what point would they need to be more concerned and start to seek additional support? You talked about only a small percentage of kids are getting the support that they need. How do parents really know when they fall into that group that really does need true anxiety
Yeah.
support?
Yeah, like I said, many kids are going to have fears, and it's a normal emotion in all of us, right? To have fears and to have worries, and all of the things that I've talked about are ways that you can address that, even if your child doesn't have significant worries. But when we start to think about, does our child need more help, or do we need more help as parents in addressing this? If your child's having really intense emotions and there doesn't seem to be a clear reason as to why that is, if those intense emotions are happening frequently throughout the day, if it's causing your child a lot of distress, if they're saying, I'm spending a lot of the day worrying, maybe it's only one small worry that they have, but they're spending all day thinking about that thing, and it's impacting their life at school, their ability to function, if it's impacting or keeping your family or your child from doing the fun things that they want to do, to live your life in a way that is aligned with your values and the things that you want or your child wants, or living a fun, full life. That's when we really tell parents to look at seeking professional help for their kids. And we really would recommend finding a child psychologist or a child therapist or social worker or counselor that specializes in particular with childhood anxiety. And the things that we're talking about today are like cognitive behavioral therapy techniques that we use with kids with anxiety. So finding somebody that really specializes in that is so important. So we would, if you're listening today and you're feeling like, yes, this is like a thing that we're dealing with on a regular basis, it's time to get your child some help.
I love that. That's a really nice definition. And we also have quite a few blogs on anxiety, and we'll make sure to link those in the show notes, because obviously we went through things pretty fast today, but we actually have visuals and things like that that can really be helpful. So we'll drop those in the show notes. So our key takeaway for today is that kids with ADHD are at a much greater risk for anxiety than their peers. But we can help our kids by validating those worries and then giving them language so that they can help feel in control of their worry thoughts. And remember, we're always here to support you on your journey.
Thanks for listening to Shining with ADHD by your hosts, Lori, Katie, and Mallory of the Childhood Collective. If you enjoyed this episode, please like this video and hit subscribe so you can be the first to know when a new episode airs.
If you are looking for links and resources mentioned in this episode, you can always find those in the show notes. See you next time.